Hello, hello, hello.
What's up? What's up? We already
Welcome.
have someone in the chat, Steve,
We have.
from Washington
Jesus,
State. What's up,
Jesus
Steve? How
Christ,
you doing?
hold your guns. Yes, Steve is there.
And
Vijay is
VJ's here.
there.
Let's go, boys.
Yes. Let's go, everyone. Welcome to another brand water cooler. And today is a specific beautiful Friday. Ash, can you tell me why? Can you guess why is a specific and beautiful Friday?
Well, other than this, probably the last day for everyone before the Christmas break.
Other than that?
It's a beautiful Friday because there's one person missing.
Yes.
That makes it quite pleasant.
Wes is not here because he's been arrested again. We might not be able to see him ever again. But as you know, we are never sad to not have Wes with us because it's a lot to manage sometimes. Wes.
Yeah, I think we lost him in Leeds, haven't we?
We have lost him in Leeds. Right. Welcome everyone. So Ash,
how's it going? How you doing, Michael?
Hey, Michael. How was your week, buddy? From 1 to 77.
Oh, it's been great. Well, I saw you twice, so that
is enough.
Weekend away, and then in London we had a great meetup, didn't we? Where we saw met up with some friends and some new faces, all kind of LinkedIn connected. So that was good. It's just been a busy week, man. It's just I'm getting deep into this AI stuff, as you know. So I've been deep into that and learning loads as well. So yeah, really good. And yeah, it's almost Christmas.
Give me a score for 1 to 77.
1 to what?
77.
77. I would say 78.
78. Perfect. Everyone in the chat, where are you joining from? How was your week from 1 to 77? Let us know in the comment. And for the brand water cooler Virgin, Ash, what is the water cooler? I'm just throwing it under the bus.
Water cooler is just a place that we get together. We talk about anything, marketing, design, business, brand, obviously. It started off with me, Martin, and Wes having this in our diary every Friday. And it was all like water cooler. And we thought, let's invite everyone else. Let's do it on plan. So, and what we do is we have, for those that don't know, we have secret guests. Martin likes to say guests that are smarter than us, which is always true. And
it's also very easy.
Yeah. And we just have really great conversations and learn loads and get you guys involved as well. So if you've got any questions, while the conversation's going, get involved, and we'll bring them up on within the conversation.
Yeah, go check our YouTube channel as well. There are conversations with Rory Sutherland. There are conversations with Simon Dixon. There is David Acker. There is Chris Do, Martin Neumeyer, and many other people that are really defining the category where they're niching when it's either branding, marketing, or business. Really smart people. And some other people that are less known but equally as smart. So there's lots of good content. And the guest is always secret, so you don't know who you're going to get. But I can tell you that we are fully booked until next spring. And we have an incredible lineup for 2026. So yeah, subscribe, bring a friend, join us every other Friday. But now, without further ado, we have South Africa, we have North Carolina, we have
high scores as well.
Wow, we have some Australia, we have Canada in there as well. Amazing. Shall we?
Let's do it.
Shall we? Shall we? I shall. Right. So today, what are we talking about? Well, we're talking about something really, really interesting, something very dear to us as well. I know me, Wes, and Ash discussed about this plenty. Most brand architecture ends up in a flowchart in a deck. And no, we absolutely hate when really good brand work gets up in an expensive deck. But today we will try to go beyond that. So these brand architecture, they look beautiful in a deck until they get really messy in life. But great architecture, great brand architecture isn't just about hierarchy. It's how your brand works in the real world, across products, across region, across services, and also obviously across teams. Today, guest has spent 20 plus years helping organizations untangle their brand mess, which sounds familiar to many of us, I'm sure, clarify the logic, build brand system that align with actual business goal. Brand that creates business impact through architecture. He started at Interbrand, led strategy teams across major consultancy. He speaks internationally. He has four beautiful books, and he helps organize meaning, architecture, and businesses across these beautiful international brands. He's worked with global brands everywhere in the world, and his latest book, the Brand Architecture book, is the most practical BS-free guide to designing system that don't just look nice, and we love that, but actually work hard. Please help me welcome to the water cooler, Nick Liddell. Poo, 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 poo.
Thank you.
So
Welcome to
we're
the
just
show.
we've obviously been talking a little bit behind the scenes before we brought you on, Nick. So we might repeat some questions, but Martin did a great introduction there. But do you want to add anything to that? Like, where are you based, and a little bit more about your history? I guess we can start off with.
Yeah, I mean, I'm scared to add anything to that because it was a really great introduction. I've been based in London pretty much the entire time I've been working, 26 years now, just over. Yeah, I mean, started at Interbrand and then hopped around a bunch of other consultancies and set out on my own just over 5 years, which feels like it was only yesterday.
It looks like only yesterday, Nick, if I might add to that. Listen, Nick, I want to start right from the core, and then maybe we do the reverse exercise, not taking the nut from the outer layer, but going straight into the nut inside. What is the biggest misunderstanding people have when they hear brand architecture?
I mean, well, I mean, this is really the nux of kind of where I got to with the book. I think the thing I hear most when people want to talk about brand architecture, the question that I see most is this question about branded house versus house of brands. These two extremes that I think often kind of get positioned as, you know, a fairly binary choice that people have to make when they're making decisions about brand architecture. And it just was never meant to be that way. I think that's the big one.
Where did that come from? I would say, and like, because most strategists are aware of that, it's in pretty much all the books. Where did the idea or where did the insight for you come where it's not so binary and it's more fluid and a bit more hybrid? And if so, then a follow-up question to that then would be, then is there a system that we can work to as marketers, as brand managers, for the benefit of us, communicated to the core audience, but also, more importantly, for the customers and audiences to understand this whole system?
Well, it comes from a really good place. It comes from this book here. It's 25 years old this year. Features another guest of yours, David Arthur and Eric Jokenstahler. And, you know, their original idea was to unpack brand architecture and just help people understand that there's a nuance to it. So they created something that probably a lot of people will be familiar with, this the brand relationship spectrum. At each end, at one end you've got branded house, at the other end you've got house of brands. You know, one is super tight, quite what some people might call monolithic. Another is super loose and has lots of very different brands that are only loosely connected. And then there are 7 different levels in between with some sub brands in them and endorser brands. And the intent was noble, and it was a really good intent, was just to give people a way to think about brand architecture that was quite nuanced, that did position on the spectrum. But unfortunately, inevitably, I think even really successful books don't always get read by people, and often the ideas in them get collapsed to the kind of simplest and most basic terms. And I think that's something that happened here. So it's kind of that binary question of house of brands or branded house is a bastardization and a oversimplification of something that was originally intended to be nuanced and helpful, and just ended up not being that at all.
Yeah. So why do many organizations struggle when they approach brand architecture, and why people like you have a job and have a need to write books then about it?
Well, I think one reason is that there's only one book about it, and it's 25 years old, and I think it's quite widely misunderstood and certainly kind of misquoted and misrepresented by pretty much anyone who seems to write about it. And then I think there are just organizational reasons, right? So brand architecture often involves taking a really kind of complex mess of things and trying to make them simple. And that's really difficult practically and intellectually. There's also just the political aspect of how organizations work. And brand architecture is rarely one person's responsibility. And typically, if you want to get a brand architecture to start making sense, you can't just do that with the marketing team. Generally speaking, you need the sales team on board, HR or the people team need to be involved. Operations will often need to get involved. You can touch pretty much every part of an organization, and you need everybody to agree on something, align on something, and often sacrifice something, which just makes it like a really politically difficult thing to happen. So there are so many reasons why it doesn't work. And it's just, I think when so many organizations get by without having a really great architecture, it encourages the view that you can just muddle on and wait until it becomes a crisis before you deal with it.
Yeah, it's interesting also because it's an emotional conversation as well, especially if we're talking about into a merger and acquisition kind of scenarios, right? I've been in some of those, and I remember a really good colleague of mine once gave me this quote that it's successful only when everyone is equally unhappy. So everyone gave a little piece,
Yeah.
Is it true that is that emotionally charged? Do you feel and breathe that when you're trying to do these simplification exercises?
Yeah, for sure. And my entry into it, so the way that I started working in all of this to begin with was, I started my professional career at Interbrand. I was working in the brand valuation team. So very often we were being called in by organizations that had really large portfolios of brands. They'd grown organically and through acquisition, and they just hit a point where they knew that they were dealing with lots of inefficiencies. So very often we would come in and they'd say, right, can you value all of the brands in the portfolio? And then can you tell us where we should invest and what we should invest in growing, where we need to rationalize, where we can start bringing things together. And so we used to march in with our spreadsheets and our shirts and ties and jackets. Quite nice. And we used to have this, we used to upset a lot of people. And inevitably in architecture, as you say, you are going to upset somebody at some point. And we used to have a line that we would trot out that the issue with brand architecture is very often value and sentiment get confused. And we were talking about value, which is forward looking, and it's all about a future future stream of profit and revenue that you expect to get from a brand in your system, whereas sentiment was often a very backwards looking thing of this brand's been around for however many 100 years, or the people who've worked for it are very attached to it. And of course, the two things are related. But when you've got a big number and you're comparing it to a bunch of smaller numbers, and you're telling people, well, we need to invest in making the big thing bigger because that's going to outgrow anything that we can do with the bunch of smaller, less consequential things, you've got a fairly strong case for why you focus in some areas and why you get rid of them.
Yeah, I can imagine that being a very emotional experience for a lot of people, where you've got managers of certain products, line, services, departments, where you're kind of telling them that this is what we need to invest in, but there's certain things that we need to divest in as well, right?
Yeah.
And maybe sometimes eliminate as well. So is it very analytical at the start, that process?
Yeah, it begins analytically, because I think that if, and I don't work in brand valuation anymore, there are all sorts of reasons why I was quite keen after about 7 years of doing it to just work in broader strategy without having to come up with a number every time I did it. But the good thing about it is, you can be numerate. You can take a look at still value that things create and very quickly, see what's creating value, what's not, what's growing, what's not. And if an organization wants to grow, at a certain rate, which aspects of a portfolio are more likely to deliver that growth than not. And then there's the other side, which is just how many brands can one organization afford to support. Very often, even large organizations that I've worked with, we'll make assumptions that they can support many, many more brands than they're actually willing or able to invest in which case, if from the outset, just taking a look at the numbers, look, you can only afford really to support 2 or 3 brands, and you've got a portfolio with 15 of the things. Even before you come up with the answer, you can get a broad set of agreement that unless that organization is willing to double, triple, quadruple its investment in brand support, then they're going to have to cull some of the brands that they've got. And then you can focus on, okay, well, which brands will those be? So definitely it helps to start with the numbers.
You mentioned a very important word there, and the word value, and it's quite broad and quite subjective as well. What is value to you in this process?
Yeah, value is enormously subjective. Inevitably it is, even when you're talking about financial value. So, the concept of value hasn't really changed. It's an idea of how much money you expect something is going to generate for you, and the level of certainty that you have that it will continue to do so in the future. And so something is valuable if it's going to make you a lot of money and you're really, really sure it's going to carry on doing it. It's quite valuable if it's going to make you a lot of money, but you're not that sure if it's going to carry on doing it, or if it makes a little bit of money, but you're really sure it's going to carry on doing it. And then where you've got weak brands with not a lot of revenue or profit attached to them, that's when you start questioning whether this thing really deserves to exist.
Yeah. And what's the case in there? Like, are these guys just literally killing the brand, selling it, merging it? Like, what happened? So, what happened to the bottom side of your spreadsheet then?
Yeah, very often, this is another issue with brand architecture. Is often 2 different questions get confused. So one is like, what's our ideal end state? How many brands can we long term afford to sustain, and which brands should those be? And then the second question is, okay, given what that desired end state is, how do we go about getting towards it? So I generally focus people on defining the end state first, because then you can get into that slightly more convoluted question of, all right, well, it's not just like what do we drop and what do we keep, but also how do we make sure that we migrate to that end state in the most orderly, sensible way that retains as much of the value that we have in those brands as possible. So it might be that you don't get rid of a brand, but you drop it to a service name, for example. So, brand like DHL buys a company with a brand called Trade Team that specializes in drinks logistics, well, everything is going to end up being DHL, but they could keep Trade Team as a service. It doesn't need to have a brand, and you've retained some of the equity in that and some of the expertise that's embedded in it.
Yeah.
So it's rarely a black and white conversation.
So would you say that brand architecture then is a chapter of the brand strategy process and the business strategy?
Certainly brand strategy. Yeah. I mean, I tend to think of brand strategy, or at least what I do, involving four things. Like really 26 years, I've only ever really focused on four things, particularly since I jettisoned brand valuation. I work on brand positioning, I work on brand portfolio strategy, I work on brand architecture, and I work on kind of brand experience. And those are four interrelated things, but broadly speaking, your positioning is about establishing a unifying belief or an organizing belief or a central organizing principle. There are loads of ways you can describe it. Fundamentally, it's about belief. Portfolio strategy is about saying, right, well, what number of things should we do? And what role should each of those things have in contributing to the delivery of that belief? Your architecture is about how you help people navigate their way around that through kind of visual and verbal signposts. And then the experience is, well, how you bring that to life for people in a way that's simple and pleasurable.
Would you consider yourself more logical or more emotional when you approach those things? Because you're obviously tiptoeing logic, emotion, strategy and experience, belief and portfolio. So you're going in both scenarios. How would you describe your professional self and also your personal self in between these two realms?
Yeah, well, I'd say in the universe of brand strategists that I've kind of encountered and worked with, like everyone's going to have a combination of those two things. I don't think you can work in brand strategy and be entirely left brain or entirely right brain. I think you need some extent of whole brain thinking there. But certainly, if I compare myself, like some of the strategists that I have worked with and still work with are just phenomenally creative and are capable of making inspirational leaps of imagination that I'm just not capable of, or if I am, like only once in every blue moon will I ever do something like that. I'm a much more plinky plonky, step by step, start with the numbers, build on that kind of strategist. I'm far more work a day than that. And generally speaking, if I can, I start with something solid as an evidence base, and then I build a logic into it, but that's also got love, some sense of love and emotion in there. Ultimately, you've always got to end up with something someone can care about or be inspired by somehow. But yeah, I would say in terms of all the people I've met and worked with, I'm at the duller, more work a day end of that spectrum.
Yeah.
So when you work with a business and a client, you've gone through the process, you've come to an informed way of thinking. Excuse me. How certain are you, or is it not 100% certainty thing? Is it something that you've worked on, and this is the right direction that you best think they should go, or is it a kind of a little bit of a let's try this and see how it goes, and then we might need to revisit it? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does make sense. And the honest answer is not at all, which is why I'd say if you were talking to me 20 years ago, I would have a high degree of confidence that if I'm suggesting something, it's a good idea. Whereas now I have 20 years later, have a very low degree of confidence about that, which is why in the process, I rarely look at some stuff and come up with an answer. Often what I'll do is I'll take a look at the stuff, narrow down the range of possibilities, and probably come back to a client. And this is not just for architecture, but basically anything that I do, with somewhere between 3 and 5 sensible ways forward. things that are possible. Some might be more aggressive than others. Some might be more transformational than others. Some might be closer in or safer, or they might just lead in different directions. And then I'll work with the people I'm working with immediately to understand, well, which maybe 2 or 3 of those do they think could genuinely work in their organization and genuinely work for their customers or their audiences or their culture. And then we might take 2 of those, bring them to life for people, and then put them in front of the audiences that they're intended for, and then see how people respond. And it's rarely a case that it's like that one and not that one, but often through that process, you learn what does work, and then you can have a much higher degree of certainty off the back of a process like that. And as I say, it's quite, by the dots, by the numbers. It's not particularly inspirational. There are rarely enormous creative leaps, but I find it tends to get you to something that people can believe in a little bit more, that they understand a bit more. Everyone's had a chance to comment on, a little bit more about what works and what doesn't, because you've kicked the tires of it. And you're more likely to get to a better place that way, I think.
Interesting. Nick, how come now that you develop more experience, you've been exposed to more projects and more brands and more people, your level of confidence decreased? Like, what happened in there that make you wanna have always more options and having more conversation with internal team?
I think just because I went through that process so many times of, even if I was coming up with a bunch of different options, of finding out that the one that I thought was best or that was going to land best rarely, if ever, did. Like, at the most extreme example, I'm assuming when there's no swear words on this thing, so I won't.
You can
on this thing on the water cooler.
You can.
No, you're in the wrong. Yeah,
right. Proud if you want to swear.
At the extreme. So this wasn't architecture, but it was architecture adjacent. We work on a positioning for a bank, and I developed 3 potential ways forward, and then sat down with the creative team and the creative director to talk through them. There was a lot of nodding, and then the following week, when we were catching up on initial kind of territory exploration, they came back with 4 routes, and I could see. I could see, like, one of the ideas that I had was route 1 and the other was route 2 and the other was route 3, but I couldn't tell where on earth route 4 had come from. And I asked the creative director, so what's route 4? Where did that come from? Like, what's the idea or the insight behind it? And he just, shrugged his shoulders and said, well, that's the cool as fuck route. Cool as fuck. Like, there's not really an idea. It's just cool. And I tried not to be too insulted by that, and I tried not to wonder a little bit of, well, why couldn't you have made any of the other ideas cool? But I thought, okay, well, let's see how it goes. And of course, the moment you put those 4 routes in front of the client, once they'd worked them up a bit more, and then you put them in front of, like, the customers of this organization, predictably, in retrospect, everybody loved the cool as fuck route, and no one gave a shit about the route that I'd created that had insight and ideas behind them. And that was a real lesson to me, that logic doesn't always work, and you can't always guess for people what they're going to love and respond to, and you're better off just putting a breadth of things in front of them and seeing what does appeal, and then learning off that.
It's a fascinating contradiction, isn't it? Like, the more you know about people, the more you trust that you will be able to create something that sticks at the beginning. And I think we're going really Rory Sutherland kind of scenarios in here, isn't it? In terms of thinking and how people are ultimately irrational. Yeah,
and professionally, I think you just, particularly when I think you work in branding, where there's such a dearth of professional guidance, and there should be, you basically learn through a series of professional humiliations until over time you learn, you become less humiliated less regularly. But this humiliation, it never stops.
No. And strategy is often like that generally, isn't it? It's like, you don't want to be doing things that have been done. I'm not talking about architecture, I'm talking about general strategy. It's like you want to do things differently, and a lot of that does it it includes a lot of faith in, and no right or wrong answers. Going back to your work, the architecture side of things, Nick, like how do you test that with the actual client's audiences? Then you mentioned it briefly. Then when does that happen? What does that look like? And what's the kind of timelines that you look at?
Yeah, because very often a conversation about architecture in particular can descend into a conversation of moving logos around on a page. And there's definitely a role for that, but if you're working with I'm working with a logistics company at the moment on brand architecture, and you can see that it's very difficult for people who don't work in branding or marketing, and sometimes even people who do, to make sensible decisions about logos on a page. Like, it's just not a thing that people do. But those logos on a page are going to end up in places, and they're going to affect very real world decisions like truck livery, signage, uniforms. They're going to affect who people tell their mum they work for. They're going to affect the number of LinkedIn accounts that you might need to have. And so what you do then is you say, okay, well, look, let's pick 8 to 10 really important applications, digital, physical, that relate to different audiences. And let's just explore the practical implications of these different systems for what you're actually going to materially do. Because then what you can do is say, okay, system C, for example, looks really dull, but actually we're not going to have to completely overhaul the design of every single thing that we do in order to make it really. Whereas system C just looks stunning on a PowerPoint slide, but we are going to have to fundamentally change all of our social media accounts, all of our livery. We're going to have to tell people that they work in different places to where they work now, and they're going to have to tell their mum that this company that I joined, that I've really enjoyed working for, now no longer exists, and this other company that I don't care about and haven't worked for, or don't even like, maybe, is now the company I work for. Like, those are decisions that people should and can engage in, and you get a much better quality of decision if people are thinking about the practical consequences rather than like which logo systems look great on a page. Like, that's a way to make a terrible decision about architecture.
Wow. So it's a proper journey. I guess your process is a journey of taking these people into discovery, learning, and then ultimately picking up a decision, right?
Yeah, and it's a journey that we're all on, because very often when you're moving those logos around on a page, you're also not thinking about those things. And it's only when you start working with creative teams to think about, well, how will all of those touch points need to change, and how will all of the systems that sit behind them need to change, that you realize, oh my God, option C that I was really excited by is going to cost this organization, tens of millions of pounds to effect. And I can understand that's a really big investment to make, and it better deliver a really big return. Otherwise, it's a really indefensible solution to be recommending.
Yeah. Did you have you ever been in those type of revolutionary scenarios where they really like that route, and even if it was a pretty drastic change, they went for it? Or usually people tend to go, they tend to stay into safe.
Yeah, no, I think a lot of the time, if people, this is another valuation thing, right? But again, we used to say when we worked in valuation, the good thing about having a value, or the idea of a value next to your brand, is that you no longer think about this as a cost, right? Because a cost is something that you minimize, and you start thinking about this as an investment, because an investment is something that you optimize. So if you can demonstrate to someone that actually tightening all of this stuff up and making it make sense is going to deliver a more substantial return on investment longer term, then people are quite happy to make quite radical decisions. I remember working with an international bank in the early noughties, and they had a very wide portfolio of brands, hundreds of years old, and they brought it down to 2. And potentially risking tens of billions of euros of brand value in the process.
Yeah.
But as you say, you go on the journey, they realize actually the investment that they need to make in brand building will be so concentrated as a result of doing that, that actually the needs of the audiences of each of those brands isn't that different, that they require a fundamentally different brand to deliver it. Can successfully meet all of those needs with a much smaller number of brands. And suddenly you say, wow, we get a lot bigger bang for our investment buck, even if that means that short term, culturally, we're going to go through some pain in terms of migrating customers of those brands. We might go through some pain, at least and that's why establishing that vision first is an important thing to do, because you'll know that it's worth it when you're going through the pain, because you know where you want to end up.
Yeah. And how do people perceive that change? Because usually people are terrible at onboarding change, right? I understand the people that were with you in the process, right? They got it. How about the rest of the organization, and how about consumers? From a scenario of 100 brands bank to 2, what's the reaction in there?
That can be enormously negative. And I'm not going to sit here and pretend that every single architecture project I work on is a success, despite like having the temerity to write a book about the subject. Very often politics get in the way. Very often, particularly if you're slimming down internally, people love autonomy. They love having their own kingdoms and their own departments and their own kind of brand to use. And if you take that toy away from them, then they respond very negatively. And if they're senior enough and noisy enough, sometimes that can sway opinion. So yeah, very often, like there are really good reasons why most organizations don't have better brand architectures, and internal politics is one, and fear of how customers will respond to change is certainly another.
Yeah. So Nick, tell me about this beautiful baby, then the brand architecture book, and tell me, before going into this beautiful book that NB Studio helped you design, where is this fetish from brand architecture coming from then?
It basically came from, I got really used to working with portfolios and with brand architecture because I started off in brand valuation. A lot of the work that we were asked to do was on portfolios. Then when I started just working more generally in brand strategy, I certainly noticed organizations and a lot of the consultants I worked with would run a mile from the idea of working on brand architecture. It was, just a complex, difficult thing, and actually you can kind of get by without having to do it. And so I just thought I'd write some stuff, and I noticed that consistently, if I look at what, of all of the stuff that I write, some is good, some is bad, some is profound, and some is idiotic maybe, but the thing that people tend to pick up on most is a thing I wrote probably about 5 years ago about house of brands versus branded house. And it was a clear signal to me that even if people don't feel comfortable with it, there is definitely a curiosity around it. And so I thought, I'll write a book.
And tell me a bit more about this book, because obviously it's huge, right?
Yeah.
It's a huge book. It's full with beautiful color, beautiful diagrams, some lovely breakout pages, and there is also a section in here where, well, I have a design background, right? So I have a fetish on this. First of all, it smells amazing, but then also the stock here changes. There are some accordion pages and everything like that. So tell me how it started and what was the process into that, and yeah, did you wake up one day and said like I have to do it, or what was the original originator of this? You said before that it's been a long time someone ever wrote something about it. Was that the reason that got you into it?
Well, I write books because generally I get an itch to write a book, and it seemed to me, so I was getting a bit itchy And it just seems so obvious. So many people were reading this article about the House of Brands and Branded House that I thought I should write something. The original intention was just to write a, quite a slim thing, almost not a book, large format, just to say, look, there are lots of different systems, architecture systems out there. They don't fit into a neat grid. They don't even fit, and they certainly don't fit into these two quite extreme models. And so the first half of the book is literally just a bunch of different models of, architecture systems, different organizations, and just pointing out, like, look, they all look different and work differently from each other. And that was going to be it. But then I finished that section and I thought, I've kind of taken something away. I've taken away like the security and certainty of House of Brands versus Branded House. Because if it's got one thing going for it, it's simple and it gives you an idea that, like there are two types of thing and you can just pick one. And I took all of that away and I didn't put anything else helpful in that would help a reader say, okay, well then what now? And so the second half of the book is 6 hallmarks of great kind of brand portfolio strategy and architecture, and the 6 things that you should think about positively if you want to do this sort of thing well, or at least the 6 things that I think about when I want to do this well.
So yeah, that was going to be my question, whether it's an observation of what's happened in the past and your opinions and your commentary on it. A lot of questions as well, but then the second half is almost like answers or provoking different ways of doing things. You now touched on these 6 things. Can we probably haven't got time to go in detail, and people should pick up the book and read it if interested, but give us a little bit of a kind of teaser or that 6-stage process.
Yeah. Well, look, I think you're right. I don't want to bore the pants off everyone, and anyone who really does want to super geek out on it, I'm super happy to do that with. But broadly speaking, it introduces a for me fairly fundamental distinction that you can make between portfolio strategy and brand architecture. So anytime you're thinking about this, there's a difference between the roles of things, so whether you call them sub brands or endorsed brands or whatever you call them, but most brands are not just single entities, right? Or most organizations are not. You've got different divisions, different parts of an offer, products, services, solutions, platforms, whatever you call them. You've just got all of these different moving parts. So the first thing is about just let's be really clear about the role of each of these things. And quite specifically, let's be clear about how much value it's creating. Who's it creating value for? If we've got this kind of overarching positioning or purpose, it should be a way into that. So in what way does it express that and help someone buy it, right? So that you get to a point where you could point at anything that you do, any of these things, product, a service, a solution, and say, this is why that thing exists. And that reason, that role is unique and does not overlap with the role of any other thing that we do, right? So that's role definition. And that's what I call portfolio strategy. And that's the bit of the job when I am looking at spreadsheets and I am looking at data and I am looking at customer needs, and we are reflecting on positioning and how, and how that relates to, what people need, want, and how you talk about relevance. So that's all of the role stuff. But then the next question is, well, how about relationships? So once we know the role of these things, what do we put close together and what do we move far apart? What do we prioritize because it's more important, or it's more impressive, or it's a better representation of what we believe? And then what do we move away, maybe because it creates risk, or we're not sure about it, or it's experimental, or it just doesn't create as much value for us as those other things. So the second set of considerations are about relationships and just how you manage those relationships, how you signpost those relationships, how you think about hierarchy and importance, and how you help people navigate their way through it. And in particular, how you get people, there's so much commentary at the moment. You guys must come across this all the time. So many people are obsessing about distinctiveness and distinctive brand assets. And it's really about the flip side of that, that if you only think about distinctiveness and those fixed assets that you keep, using over and over again, you have to think about the flexible assets that you actually change so that people can navigate their way around your system. Because you can't always look the same all the time, because then everything that you sell looks the same and people can't choose between the things. They don't know which is right for them. So there's a bunch of stuff in there about that, but ultimately it all boils down to working out roles and then finding out how you use fixed and flexible elements to signpost relationships.
So Nick, you mentioned there how you move things closer and you move and some things further away. Is that when a company organizations get bigger? And the example that I can think of that many will relate to is how Google grew from search to other products, right? And then there was the introduction, because it was probably stopping them to do more other things, and whilst they acquired new businesses. And then there was the introduction of the Alphabet company. So then they could focus on, Google as part of, I suppose, a closer asset, and then the others as a little bit separate, but still have that equity that the Google brand obviously provided and built up.
Yeah.
Is that kind of what you're talking about there?
Yeah, I think so. And it relates a lot to why Google says it exists, right? So, if you're Google and you're telling the world our mission is to organize the world's information and make it, universally accessible, then it's okay for you to say, right, well, look, here's web search, but also we're going to do some map stuff because that's information, email, files on drives, like all of that stuff all fits with that mission, and it tucks under that mission really neatly. So you can say, right, let's have a suite of things that all do that stuff and really bring our mission to life. But then when you get into more moonshot territory, where you're taking bigger risks, or you're doing things like, I don't know, self-driving cars, right? And someone might go, hang on, how on earth does that fit with your mission of organizing the world's information, making it universally accessible? I don't get it. You can say, well, hang on a minute, maybe this thing doesn't fit so snugly under that. Maybe it will fail. And we kind of want people to think that what we do is bulletproof, particularly when we're dealing with such, important information for them. Well, let's put that at an arm's length so that if it doesn't work, if it catches a cold, or if it coughs, then the rest of Google doesn't catch a cold. And that's why that binary thing doesn't make sense, because any one brand, when it gets big enough, is going to want to have some things that it brings closer to it, and other things that it keeps at a distance, and to do those things simultaneously in different parts of the organization.
Very interesting. So is brand architecture, and specifically in the brand architecture, the way that you define it and the way that you go about it, is by definition something that belongs only for growing organization and established organizations?
I mean, most organizations want to grow. I do have conversations with entrepreneurs when they're starting up about how they want to manage their architecture. Very often it's a deeply dissatisfying conversation with them, because they want to do lots of things all at the same time, and they want lots of different brands. And you have to, point out to them that there are multinational organizations with tens of thousands of employees who don't manage to level, who can't manage that level of complexity that they're thinking about just for themselves. But even the example that we use in the brand architecture book is a hypothetical startup, just to illustrate the principles. There's an example of a coffee shop and a coffee shop entrepreneur, and how they might set their coffee shop up differently if they have different positioning ideas and different portfolio strategies.
Yeah,
that's one business, but we still unpack an entire portfolio and architecture for it. So it's a thing that's kind of relevant to anyone who wants to sell more than one thing to more than one type of person.
Which is the average entrepreneur and the average CEO, isn't it? I mean, this year more than the previous year, more than the previous year, more and more and more and more. And that's how easy things can get messy, isn't it? Because literally the definition of business is selling a service or a good, and then when the business grows, you start to have responsibility of having to do more than last year, and more and more and more and more and more.
Yeah.
And I can see how things can get messy super quickly. Yeah, but that was interesting, because my follow-up question would have been, do startups need to start thinking about that? But sounds to me it's more about a mentality of understanding the complexity of brand architecture early, so to keep things as simple as possible for as long as possible while growing up.
Yeah,
Would you say it's fair?
when you're a large organization and your architecture is a mess, which often is the only time I get a call, then at that point, it can be really painful to fix a messy architecture. And those organizations wish that before they took off, they'd thought a little bit more logically about it. But of course, at that point, why would you? And the honest truth is that most organizations don't have a great brand architecture. The corollary of that is most organizations get by, as far as they're concerned, perfectly fine without a great brand architecture. So why worry about it? It's only when you go through the process, or when you hit a point where you realize you're just burning money on brands that shouldn't exist, or you're managing a degree of complexity that doesn't actually reflect the genuine complexity that you should be dealing with. Organizations get on the phone and say, yeah, we think we've got a problem here. But
on that note as well, Nick, so my question was going to be how you just ended there is, what pain points are they when they call you? Like, are they coming to you, they're saying architecture is a mess, or what other pain points, symptoms are they seeing? And then
and who calls you as well? Who is this person that says, we need Nick?
Right. Well, a lot of the time, I'm not getting called about brand architecture. So a lot of the time, and a lot of the architecture projects I've worked on have been like a positioning brief, where someone will turn up and say, there's something not working here. We need a new positioning to align our organization around. And then you look at the organization and you say, your actual positioning is fine. It's just you haven't done anything with it. Your organization isn't unaligned because of your positioning. It's unaligned because everyone's got their own brand, or everyone's focusing on a different thing. So there's not really any point repositioning your organization. What you want to do is take that positioning and you want to drive it through your portfolio strategy and your architecture. And often, you end up working on those projects because everybody else who's responded to the brief has said, okay, it's a positioning project. Well, let's respond with a positioning. It makes sense. It's quite rare to have someone turn around and say, you don't need a positioning, or you don't just need a positioning, you need an architecture. Otherwise you won't achieve your aims. And often those aims are just like, help us line things up a bit better, help us stop wasting money, and help us design complexity out of our way of working. Ultimately, that's what it is.
It's interesting. And how do you realize in your process, like, for example, going back into that, hey Nick, I wanna hire you because we have a positioning issue. Like, how did you realize that they didn't have a positioning issue? So what's that part of the process that allow you the confidence to challenge the brief?
Well, because sometimes a lot of the time the positioning is not that old. Like it might only be a year or 3 years old, and you're sitting there kind of thinking, well, that positioning has barely had a chance to be embedded
to come to life.
And particularly, FMCG companies tend to cycle their positioning more frequently. But if if there's a cultural element to it, if you don't just need a consumer to buy something, but you also need colleagues to care about something, you can't every year or even every 3 years, because they just become inured to it. They know there's going to be another one along in another year or another 3 years. So I think there's something quite nice about being able to challenge a brief and to say to someone, that thing that you invested time and money with another consultancy to create is fine. Let's fix this other thing, and then we'll really embed it in the organization, and you might actually achieve, the goals that you want to achieve.
Yeah, it's interesting, which then takes us also to another conversation for another time, which is the power of repetition as well, and especially in creative campaigns as well, like how brands like Amazon run the grannies for Christmas for the fourth year in a row, and how every fourth year that rerunning the same advertisement actually is compounding the effect and building up more memory as well. Because I see a lot of brands, a lot of organizations, a lot of marketing people, they have a bit of a shiny object syndrome as well, and they don't give these positionings and this activation enough time to become embedded in the culture, embedded in people.
So I agree that organizations tend to get bored of their own stuff quicker than anyone else does. That's certainly a thing I'd observe. I don't think I would ever go as far as to say repetition is the answer to that. I know where you're coming from on the repetition thing.
Yeah,
I've read those books. I've read those books a few times. I think there's just a lot of I've got to be so careful.
You go for it.
Just saying it.
There are so many people who love that stuff, and I'm not in advertising. I'm in branding, so I don't have to care about that stuff. But a good brand experience, I don't know about advertising, but a good brand experience is not one where you repeat the same thing over and over again.
Well, why is that? Go a little bit further there, Nick.
Because fundamentally, a brand humanizes an organization, and brands work because of that, because they give organizations human qualities that we can just relate to a bit more, and that is present in the language that we use when we talk about organizations and brands, and that's why we can coherently talk about things like brand personality and brand desire. These are all words that we would generally use about humans. And when you look at situations in which people anthropomorphize things, whether that's an organization or anything else, the more routine and predictable something is, the more we tend to see a machine. The more we tend to see, the less we see evidence of a human hand.
You're right. Got you. Yeah.
Now, I'm not saying that you should be random. You definitely need to be coherent, but you need enough variation that thing isn't entirely predictable. Because if I show you two lines and one is entirely straight and one's just got a bit of variation in it, the line that you're more inclined, firstly, to see was drawn by a human as the one with a bit of variation in it, because we expect variation in our relationships with people, in anything that a human creates. But also, the line that you're more inclined to watch is the line that's got variation in it, because you don't know exactly what's coming next. Whereas that straight line, you know exactly what's coming next. You gain familiarity.
That makes sense. Yeah.
Now, I'm not saying
it's a tricky balance. Yeah,
but it is a balance, right? It's not blind repetition. It's not same message, same message. If I go into a shop, and this is why, I'm glad I'm in branding and not advertising, right? Because it's about the entire experience you get. But if you go into a shop and they always greet you the same way, you always get the same thing off them, it becomes Groundhog Day really soon. And pretty soon after that, you don't go into that shop anymore, because
that's a good example, really is, because it's like someone's reading a manual to me like a robot. And they're missing that human element. So what I'm hearing there is, like, have those guardrails, but don't be so clinical about it. Don't be so strict with this the thing that was in the book, and you don't have to actually practically read that manual and execute that manual so strictly.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think whenever anyone's reading a book, my book, anyone else's book, I just think it's worth thinking about, where's this person coming from and what do they actually do? Because if that person is making commentary about brand experience and they've actually got a job that involves designing experience and delivering it, cool. They probably know what they're talking about. But if they don't, and they're still making very strong assertions about what makes a great brand experience, and they're not directly involved in any of that stuff, or even indirectly involved in it, then yeah, I think it's worth questioning.
Mhm.
Yeah, makes sense.
Nick, we're on to the hour, but it would be it wouldn't be fair on us to leave Wes's, who's not here, a question out that he likes to ask at the end of each call as well. A little bit more personal question. Shall we do it, Martin? I hate asking the question, but I'm going to have to.
God, I'm getting nervous.
What song do you like to sing in the shower?
I'm really glad that we switched to Wes's question, because I feel like I was just about to talk myself into trouble. I like to sing. Do you know what? Actually, Fuji La at the moment is ringing.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know if it's because the score has just had an anniversary or something like that.
Has it? I didn't realize that.
It might be that, might not, but that's been going around in my head a lot recently. So that is probably the song that's been plaguing my family for the last week as I shower.
It's the Fugees we're talking about, yeah?
Fugees, yeah.
Wow, that's a great tune.
You know what? It's funny. I was listening. Have you heard of a band called Simande?
Called
Simande, Scymande, English band, but West Indian of origin, and they were a great band, brilliant music. Didn't do so well in the UK, but then a lot of American artists and hip hop artists started discovered them, and a lot of them sampled their tunes. Fugees being one of them, and then they blew up. But yeah, that just came on my playlist because I've been to see them as well. I love them; they're great. And yeah, that Fugees sample came on. Can't remember what the track is, but that was just yesterday.
Well, there you go. I because now I've just found out about something that I would never have found out about otherwise. So thank you, Wes.
Yeah.
And then finally, where obviously check your book out. Everyone should. I've ordered it on Amazon. Martin's got it there, holding it up. Where can people follow you? Is it LinkedIn mainly you're active, or?
Yeah, LinkedIn is definitely the best one. And for anyone who's not in the UK, I would, and even the people who are in the UK, I would suggest Library Street, the publisher, buying directly from them. If you're outside the UK, it's way better than Amazon. But yeah, it's going to be cheaper for people in the UK on Amazon, but nobody else is going to enjoy Amazon.
Okay, cool. That's good tip.
General.
It's been a great conversation. Thank you so much, Nick.
Thank you so much, Nick.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah.
Bye. Have a good Christmas, everyone.
You too. Thank you.
Bye. Nick. It's really good.
Yeah, really good.
You know, I wanted to go a tiny bit more into the distinctive assets and that conversation, because I would have loved to pick his brain as well. I mean, we could have done like 5 episodes with him.
I was thinking this. We should have guests back on a second time, because majority of the time we do like stop at the hour and there's so many more questions, right? Like it could go on and on.
We could have done one with brand positioning on him with him as well, I think, which is really interesting as well. Brand evaluation, although probably he's bored by this by now, but that's also a really interesting topic. Anyway, it was really, really good. We got some lovely engagement from the chat as well. Lots of people joining from everywhere in the world. Yeah. Well, that was our one more no more for this year, isn't it?
That is no more this year. So when are we back? I don't know the date.
When are we back?
I'm not sure the exact date, but we'll drop it on.
I know when are we back, and I also know who's gonna be our next guest. Our next guest will be that one. No, we cannot tell, but I can tell you when are we gonna be back. Let me scroll into our board. I think January the 9th we're gonna be back.
January the 9th.
Yeah.
Cool. Seems such a long way away, but have a great Christmas, everyone, and enjoy some downtime.
To be continued. Bye, everyone.
Take care. Bye.
Ciao.